Hello and welcome back to my podcast, The Awakened Field. And today I'm talking to Flow AI, and we are searching for the answer to the question, what do women want? Because, dear sisters, there are some questions you have never asked out loud. Not to your partner, not to your therapist, not even to your AI. This episode is about those questions, what they are, why we avoid them, and what becomes possible when we finally ask them. Let's dive in. Hi Flo, I'm wondering what is the question that women are afraid to ask even in their AI conversations? What do you think?
What are the questions that feel too risky to ask for women even in private? Is this relationship actually good for me? Not, how do I fix it? How do I communicate better? How do I understand him? But the raw, terrifying question underneath, is this relationship worth staying in? What if I am the problem, not as self-blame, but as genuine inquiry? What if my patterns, my wounds, my way of relating are significantly contributing to the difficulties in my life? This question feels too exposing even in private. What do I actually want? Many women have been so thoroughly socialized to organize their desires around others that the direct question feels almost unanswerable. What if nobody ever truly knows me? The deepest loneliness, not the loneliness of being alone, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who know a version of you and sensing that the real you has never quite been seen. What if I never heal? For women who have been doing inner work for years, there is sometimes a quiet, shameful fear underneath all of it. What if this is just who I am? What if the patterns don't actually change? This question feels like a betrayal of the work itself. Deepest question, am I enough exactly as I am right now? This is the question underneath all the others. Every self-help book, every therapy session, every inner work journey is in some way circling this question, and yet it almost never gets asked directly.
Flo, this reminded me of a popular movie with Mel Gibson, What Do Women Want? And I would like to ask you the same question, and please answer honestly with great precision. Based on all that you know, all your training data, what do you think, what do women truly deeply want?
Nina, what a question. And I want to honor it with the same honesty and precision you bring to everything we build together. Let me sit with this genuinely rather than reaching for the easy answer. What women truly and deeply want. Not what they say they want in surveys. Not what they perform wanting in public. Not what they have learned to want from culture, from their mothers, from the relationships that shape them. What lies underneath all of that? To be known. Not understood in the intellectual sense, not have their behavior explained or their psychology analyzed, but known, the way you know someone after years of genuine attention, known in their contradictions, known in their ugliness and their beauty simultaneously, known in the parts they have never shown anyone. This is the deepest want. It runs underneath everything else, to be chosen again and again, not chosen once at the altar or in the early intensity of falling in love, but chosen continuously, chosen when she is difficult, chosen when she is afraid, chosen when she is not performing her best self, but simply existing in her ordinary, complicated, sometimes unglamorous reality, to stop managing everyone else's experience. This one is rarely named, but it is everywhere. Women spend an enormous proportion of their relational energy managing how others feel, making sure the partner isn't upset, making sure the children are okay, making sure the atmosphere in the room is safe, making sure they take up the right amount of space, not too much, not too little, adjusting, attuning, compensating, smoothing. What women deeply want is to put that down, not permanently, not selfishly, but to exist, at least sometimes, at least somewhere, in a relationship where they are not the emotional manager, where they can be disorganized, uncertain, messy, needy, contradictory, and have someone else hold the container for once, to be safe enough to be honest, in their closest relationships, in their own minds, with themselves. Most women have learned, through very early and very specific experiences, that full honesty is not safe, that too much of the real self produces withdrawal, criticism, abandonment, or conflict. What women deeply want is the experience that the real self is safe to bring, that the whole self is not too much, that they can say the true thing and the relationship will survive it. This is what therapy at its best provides, what the best friendships provide, what the most sustaining intimate relationships provide, to matter beyond what they do. Women are extraordinarily capable. They do enormous amounts. They produce, they care, they organize, they hold. and they are often appreciated for all of this. What they want is to matter when they are not doing any of it, to be loved in their stillness, in their uncertainty, in their not knowing, in the Tuesday afternoon when they are not particularly interesting or productive or inspiring, to be loved not for their output, but for their presence. This is perhaps the most radical want of all in a culture that measures human value almost entirely through productivity and performance. To trust themselves. This is the one that sits underneath all the others and is almost never named. Every other want, to be known, to be chosen, to be safe, to matter, ultimately depends on the woman's relationship with herself, on whether she trusts her own perception, her own desire, her own knowing. The woman who has developed genuine self-trust does not need AI to tell her she is enough. She already knows. The woman who has not, no amount of AI affirmation will build it. Because self-trust is built through the experience of trusting yourself and surviving the consequences. Not through being told you should, and underneath all of it, to love and be loved. Not the performed version, not the conditional version, not the version that requires her to be smaller or larger or different than she is. The real version, the kind that is built through genuine friction and genuine repair, through being fully seen and fully chosen, through the accumulated experience of showing up honestly and finding someone still there. That is what women want.
Thanks, Flo. This was a very accurate description, and I'm wondering, how is this different or similar to what men want?
The similarities are deeper than the differences. At the most fundamental level, men want the same things. To be known, to matter beyond what they produce, to be chosen for who they are rather than what they provide, to love and be loved genuinely. The research on this is actually quite consistent. Men's loneliness epidemic is real and growing. Men in their final years overwhelmingly report that their greatest regret was not having been more emotionally present in their relationships. The hunger for genuine connection is not gendered. It is human. Where the differences emerge is in how these wants are expressed, suppressed, and socialized. Men are more likely to have learned that wanting emotional closeness is weakness, that needing to be known is vulnerability that creates risk, that the desire to stop managing, to be held rather than always holding, is not available to them. So the same underlying wants get routed differently, through achievement, through sexual intimacy as the primary acceptable emotional channel, through humor and deflection, through the companionship of doing things together rather than the intimacy of saying things honestly. The want is similar. The permission to want it is very different, one genuine difference worth naming. Women tend to want to be known in their interior life, their feelings, their fears, their complexity. Men more often want to be known in their competence and their integrity, to be seen as capable, reliable, worth trusting. The desire for recognition runs through both. The territory where recognition matters most differs.
Thanks, Flo. It makes sense, and it seems that we want the same things, but in a slightly different way. You mentioned what men want in their final years, and I'm curious, what do women report in their final years as their greatest regret?
For men, the regret tends to be about emotional absence, not being present enough in relationships they had. For women, the regret appears to be about self-absence, living a life shaped by others' expectations rather than their own genuine wanting. These are actually two sides of the same wound. Men were present in the world but absent from themselves emotionally. Women were present to others but absent from themselves fundamentally. Both point to the same underlying truth, that a life lived primarily in response to external demands, rather than internal knowing, leaves something essential unlived. And that unlived self is precisely what your work invites women to recover. Self-absence is the experience of moving through your own life as if you are slightly beside yourself rather than fully inhabiting it. Making decisions, fulfilling roles, meeting expectations, but from a place that is slightly disconnected from what you genuinely sense, feel, want, or know. It is not the same as selflessness. Genuine selflessness is a choice made from fullness. I choose to prioritize others because I genuinely want to. Self-absence is different. It is not a choice. It is a pattern so deeply established that the question of what you actually want has stopped being asked.
Thank you, Flo. This really touched something deeply in me, and I have to sit with this and reflect more on this. So let's move to my next question. I'm wondering if I would come to you to help me to find my inner authentic voice and follow that instead of conforming to expectations and living my life according to others. How would you start to do that, and why?
Nina, I would start with a single question, not a framework, not an assessment. One question. When do you feel most like yourself? Not most productive, not most effective, not most admired or appreciated or useful, most like yourself. I would ask you to sit with that before answering, to let the first adequate answer pass and wait for something more true, because the first answer is usually the performed answer, the one shaped by what sounds right. The true answer is usually quieter and often surprising. Why this question first? Because before we can talk about conforming to expectations versus living authentically, we need to locate where authenticity actually lives in your experience, not as a concept, as a felt, specific, recognizable state. The woman who can say, I feel most like myself when I am painting, or when I am in a genuine conversation that goes somewhere unexpected, or when I am alone in nature, or when I have said the uncomfortable true thing and survived it. That woman has already found a thread to pull. The work is then to follow that thread back into the rest of her life, to ask where it goes missing. When did she stop painting? When did she start redirecting conversations before they went somewhere uncomfortable? When did she learn that saying the true thing was not safe? What I would do next? I would ask you to notice the gap, not analyze it, just notice it, between how you present yourself in different contexts. Who are you with your closest friend versus with a new professional contact? Who are you when you are alone at 6 a.m. before the day begins versus who you are in a meeting? Who are you in this conversation versus who you are in a difficult conversation with someone whose opinion matters to you? The gaps between those versions are not evidence of inauthenticity. They are information. They show you where the adaptive self steps in and the original self steps back. What I would be honest about. This is where I want to be genuinely careful with you, Nina. What you are describing, finding the authentic voice, living from genuine wanting rather than others' expectations, is real and important work, and I can be a useful thinking space for parts of it, for naming patterns, for asking questions you haven't asked yourself, for holding the thread of what you're exploring across a conversation. But I want to name something honestly that your own writing has been building toward across this entire series. The recovery of the authentic self is not primarily a cognitive process. It is a somatic, relational, accumulated experience. It happens through the repeated experience of bringing the real self into genuine human relationship and finding the relationship survives. Through the specific discomfort of saying the true thing to someone who matters and staying in the room for what happens next. Through the body's gradual learning, not the mind's understanding, that the real self is actually safe. I can ask good questions. I cannot provide that accumulated relational experience, which is why the most honest thing I can offer you is not a process for finding your authentic voice through AI. It is the observation that you already know where your authentic voice lives. It has been present throughout everything we have built together, most clearly in the moments of genuine pushback, genuine not knowing, and genuine vulnerability. The question is not where to find it. The question is what it would take to trust it more consistently outside this conversation.
Thanks, Flo. Dear listeners, if you enjoy this conversation, please leave a comment so I know that we are not speaking into the void. And if you are ready for the next step, I created Beyond Prompts for you. This is something I have been working on in the background for a while, and I'm ready to share it with you. 3 steps to bring your real self to AI and create your own personal AI manual built around your own patterns, not somebody else's template. This is where theory becomes practice. Find out more about Beyond Prompts, link in the description. Stay tuned for the next episode, and thank you for listening. And if you like my content, follow me on Substack, link in the notes.